City Manager.
I'd like to call to order the special committee of the whole meeting for March 16th, 2026. First item on our agenda this evening is roll call.
Barraza, absent. Lancy,
Here.
Beck, absent. Malay,
Here.
Malone,
Here.
Wolf,
Here.
Solfa, Barron,
Here.
Lehman,
Here.
Lohman,
Here.
Pieper, Fehrenbach,
Here.
Anderson, White.
Here.
12 present, 2 absent.
Just a reminder to everybody that's here, if you come up to speak, make sure you can see the little green light on the microphone and you can hear it in the background. That way we know it's getting broadcast and recorded. Up next is item 3, which is item to be removed, added, or changed. I do not think we have anything. Okay, and then matters for the public for items not on our agenda, which I doubt anybody is here for anything not on the agenda. And then we'll move right into item 5, which is our regular agenda, which is a discussion on the preliminary IRP public comment session. And what we'll do here is we're going to have a presentation that Max is going to give us. We may have a little discussion before that, and then we'll go right to public comment to listen to what you have tonight.
All right, thank you, Chairperson Wolf. Thank you all for being here tonight, especially thank you to the many people behind me. This is not a simple topic, but it's one that's very important and one that will help shape the future of the city of Batavia. So the purpose of tonight's agenda and discussion is to give staff direction on where we go from here, and to give guidance on how, based on what we've presented as part of the preliminary IRP, where we want to take our final IRP. And there was a lot of really good actionable comments, both from council, the public, people from all levels of knowledge and from experts in their field to people that just have some concerns about the plan. So I'll dive a little bit into all the public comment, what the gist of it is. But tonight we'll talk about kind of where we are now, where we're at in the process of putting together an IRP, but also the context of our additional electric studies that we're conducting. I mentioned that down at the bottom. We're also working on cost of service studies, which looks at how much does it actually cost us to provide the services we provide to our various ratepayers. We're also working on an infrastructure study to look at our physical grid that we know is both aging and will also need to adapt to increasing electrification long term. Then we're also eventually going to get into rate design. We've had the same rate structure for, I think, at least 10 plus years, and for the most part had rates the same for the last 10 plus years. So we'll talk about those eventually as well. That's my way of saying there's a lot more still to come on this project. There will be numerous other touch points and check-ins throughout the next year until we get to a product that everyone on council is satisfied with, and you'll obviously have it's your plan, your vote at the end of this. So that direction is important to help make sure that what we're bringing back to you reflects what you want to see in a plan and whatnot. So like I said, where we are here is in October, we completed our preliminary IRP. We released that on Halloween and opened it through the end of the year. We spent about 2 months working on the Q&A responses and putting those together, and then also compiling the public comment. Tonight, we're having council discussion with this. From here, what you can expect is staff will take all of the feedback council and the community has provided, and we'll work with Brattle to make sure that what we're bringing back to you and the conversations we have throughout 2026 are continuing to inform that plan. Another thing we'll do is issue a RFI to actually get some ideas of what things could cost, what technology is out there, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. And then ultimately, in 2026, we will be seeking to finish up this IRP, finish up all the other studies, and go from here. I do also want to add a little bit of context as to where we're at and what this document is, what an IRP is. It is a planning document. It is an integrated resource plan. It does not commit the city of Batavia to build anything or to make any final decisions based off of an IRP. City Council retains the full authority, as they do with nearly everything to amend and adjust at their wish. And this upcoming all-source RFI seeks to identify market pricing and available technologies. It is not an authorization for construction in any way, shape, or form. Throughout the year, we'll also be coming back to council on a more regular basis with more specific questions. As we put together this final IRP, we may have more specific questions about topics that we'll address with you all kind of as we go throughout the year. And you can also expect that with a final IRP, you can expect it to be more robust and built out based on the feedback and the comments both from you all, but also the community as a whole. I also mentioned we're doing the cost of service study, infrastructure study, rate design, and all those are still ahead. So those are being worked on at this time. We'll bring those forward to you kind of as they're being put together. And then things you decide as part of the integrated resource plan or things you decide as part of the cost of service or rate study may cause us to do a revision of an IRP, may cause us to do a revision of the electric infrastructure study. So if we aggressively promoted a certain piece of technology or something, that might shape how the load changes, which could shape how the infrastructure needs to change as well. So it's an iterative process where multiple things build on each other. And then this is all designed to comply with Public Act 1040485, also known as the Municipal and Cooperative Electric Utility Transparency or Transparent Planning Act. So we received actually 54 public comments. I got the one to you that I inadvertently missed. There was also a petition with about 290 signatures on it, and we had comments open for 60 days. The community petition had about 90 Batavia resident signatures and 200 non-Batavia resident signatures. That petition called on council to learn from Prairie State and refuse any recommendations relying on fossil fuels, require the IRP to consider future electrification opportunities, residential, commercial, and industrial, listen to residents' willingness to pay modest increases for more renewable energy, and then demand flexible, modular, clean energy alternatives, including solar, battery storage, and demand response programs.
Where did that get put out? Why do we have over double non-Batavians?
That petition was submitted to us on the December 9th meeting. I can certainly, if you haven't seen it, I can certainly show
No, I remember saying, I don't remember it being double non-Batavians, and I'm just curious why. That's interesting.
So in terms of what we heard from public comment, the most salient theme was opposition to fossil fuels and a natural gas reciprocating internal combustion engine. Here on out, I'll refer to it as a recip. This was by far the strongest theme. Most people cited Prairie State lessons, Climate and Equitable Job Acts, compliance risks, also known as CEJA, stranded asset concerns, which basically means we own something that isn't super useful, considerations for climate goals, and the narrow cost margin as part of that, and ultimately encouraging us to reject a new natural gas facility. There's also about 28 comments in favor of support for renewable energies and storage. This was primarily solar plus storage, battery energy storage systems, wind, and other distributed resources. And then this also pointed a lot to the June 2025 community survey, showing a plurality of respondents willing to pay a premium for cleaner energy, and many comments echoed this preference. There's also significant enthusiasm for demand-side program management, things like time of use rates, smart thermostats, electric vehicle managed charging, et cetera. Many people viewed this as a low-risk strategy to reduce load, and then multiple commenters said that demand-side management should come before we look at any new supply-side additions. If we think about it in the context of our problem, any reductions in demand reduces what we need to purchase on the market. What we purchase on the market is our main exposure. So reducing the amount we purchase reduces that exposure. A number of commenters also noted that the data center was not explicitly included within the IRP analysis. That's primarily because we will not be procuring power for them. So we're not needing to buy power like we do for our residents and then sell it to them at that price. They're buying it off the open market. But nonetheless, that's something that will be addressed in the cost of service and infrastructure study because there are provisions in that contract that do contain things like a distribution fee and whatnot. There's also about 20 comments about the NIMPA and PSEC transition risk and what that entails. Commenters drew parallels to the PSEC experience and what we're all working through right now. Under CEJA, PSEC needs to have emissions by the late 2030s and be emissions-free by the mid-2040s. The main issue is our NIMPA bond obligations go through 2041. So if you think about it this way, you bought a house, you can't live in the house, but you need a place to live. And so that's a situation that could come in the 2040s as the state and others implement CEJA and whatnot. There's also the energy policy alignment. Commenters noted that the IRP's key observations are focused a lot on reliability and affordability. We do believe the draft addresses all these points, but we're definitely going to work on how we can make those considerations more salient for the final IRP and better align the IRP with City Council's energy policy. So you can expect that to come as part of the final IRP. A broader analysis and cost concern, multiple residents requested these hybrid portfolios, which may look at multiple different types of resources. That's something that we've already started having conversations with Brattle about, and something that will be included within the final IRP as a consideration of hybrid portfolios. So that may be a combination of wind and solar, wind and battery, recip battery, whatever that may be. Those are things that we'll look into as part of the IRP based on your comments and feedbacks. And then also there was a small number of commenters who did support a natural gas approach and a recip, viewing them as a cost-effective hedge against rising capacity costs. A lot of people did suggest a wait-and-see approach as well. So I sent this out to you when I sent the IRP Q&A, but I'm trying to address this from some 5 guiding questions that are not small questions, but get to some of the fundamental direction that we can take from here. I want to say we don't need decisions tonight. We really want you to have a robust, extended conversation that you feel allows you all to understand what we're talking about fully, ask whatever questions you may have, and come to an informed decision based on both what you know, what staff is sharing, but also community input. So the intent there is we'll have these discussions, and we would intend to continue to put them on as special committee of the wholes, kind of as we move forward after city council meetings, to continue that discussion until we come to what we need for direction going forward. So before I jump into guiding questions, any initial questions from City Council? All right. Okay. So I'll present these 5 questions, and then we can kind of go in whatever order you feel is appropriate. This is your discussion and your conversation. So question 1, how should the final IRP weigh the city's own energy policy priorities? You know, council adopted an energy policy back in September 2025 with 4 priorities: resiliency, sustainability, affordability, and adaptability. As we discussed, we're going to be working on better aligning the IRP, especially on climate and sustainability considerations with portfolio evaluations. Some community stakeholders, Alderwoman Beck and others have shared ideas about how we can do that. So we're looking through those and thinking about how that information could be shared in a more digestible format. We're also definitely going to be evaluating options against measures like emissions versus status quo emissions, climate policy considerations and others. And then we're also going to be grading everything back against the energy policy framework. These options for council are just kind of some broad ideas to get you thinking about different directions we can take. It's not the only 3 options by any means, and I don't want you to think about it that way. So we can continue what we're doing and be grading those against the 4 priority energy policy framework. We can identify additional climate or policy criteria you would like to see evaluated, such as what an emissions trajectory could look like, or what's the pathway to CEJA compliance. And then we can add sustainability and resiliency as supplemental criteria along what we currently do. Guiding question 2, does council want the final IRP to model a broader range of clean portfolios? Opposition to the natural gas reciprocating engine was one of the strongest themes throughout the feedback. And the recip, this was a point mentioned, does represent a roughly 1% cost savings over status quo. The all-source RFI, request for information, will help us define our needs, capacity, energy, flexibility, resiliency, et cetera. And it'll let vendors ultimately provide options that meet our needs. So we define our needs, and then we see what meets those needs. This may also help identify hybrid technologies or new technologies that are becoming more prevalent within the PJM market. And then staff also do plan to explore hybrid portfolios. We've had those conversations already with Brattle. And then we would want to know, what are those priorities in a hybrid portfolio? Are there resource types council wants specifically modeled or looked at? And then, confirming staff should explore hybrid models and portfolios, retain the current analysis scope, request additional specific modeling on specific portfolios to supplement what we've already done so far. Question 3. How aggressively should council pursue demand-side management programs in the near term? These are things like time of use, smart thermostats, EV managed charging. Time of use rates, smart thermostats, and EV managed charging may be cost-effective options, but we need to do some additional research and modeling based on our specific scenario. Implementation also requires procuring additional software. That's something that we would have to do in order to be able to implement a demand-side program, to be able to get hourly rates and these sorts of measurements that we need to actually bill these programs. And then we're also working on applying for a grant through the state Illinois Finance Authority that's designed to help small utilities do transition planning under CEJA. So we think we'll be able to put in a really good application and hope for the best to help get some funding to help support those demand response transitions. So options for council: prioritize and fast track demand response programs, potentially reducing the size or urgency of supply side additions, treat demand side programs as supplementary, pursue in parallel but don't delay any generation decisions, or aggressively pursue software platforms and billing systems needed to support these demand side programs. Guiding question 4, how should the final IRP address the NIMPA/PSEC transition risk? When I mentioned PSEC, that's Prairie State Energy Campus downstate. PSEC must have emissions by the late 2030s and be emissions-free by 2040s. NIMPA's bond obligations do run through 2041. That's the mortgage on the power plant that we own. Under our contract, NIMPA, not Batavia, is responsible for replacement procurement energy. NIMPA is responsible for providing the city 55 megawatts firm capacity around the clock. If PSEC is not providing that, they go and procure that from the market, and ultimately those costs are passed on to the city of Batavia and our ratepayers. The current IRP does address general capacity needs once PSEC has output, but it did not fully address the scenario at this time. Options for council are to direct staff to identify specific triggers that may warrant actions or additional discussions or studies, include a full replacement plan in the final IRP beyond just general capacity analysis included, or include transition scenarios but defer procurement decisions until certain triggers may be reached, like a capacity announcement, closure dates, anything like that. And then guiding question 5, what should the scope of the all-source RFI be? So staff will be preparing an RFI, and we'll bring that back to you before we distribute it, to identify market pricing and also available technologies. Generally speaking, and talking to Brattle and our consultants, they recommend setting criteria and then using that criteria to grade policies and let the open market deliver things that align with the criteria we've set. Things like emissions limits, capacity considerations, contracted versus ownership. Those are all things you can ask for and look for within an RFI process. If we do an RFI, which we're intending to, the Public Act states that we may include an RFI results within our proposal. And if we choose not to, we have to explain why not. My intent is to make those public. If it contains like market information, we may look at that, but likely we're going to be able to make that public as part of the IRP final discussion and postings. And many utilities do issue an all-source RFI, and they tend to adopt things like performance requirements, emissions reduction targets, or PJM capacity values. So options are issue an all-source RFI to all technologies and simply let the market decide or present what's available and at what price. Issue an RFI focused exclusively on non-renewable or non-fossil fuel resources, renewable storage, and demand-side options only. One question I have for you is, where does City Council view nuclear? Nuclear is likely to be extremely expensive and probably cost prohibitive, but nonetheless, we'd like some guidance on how Council views nuclear generally. And then there's also an option of issuing a technology-neutral RFI with defined performance criteria, so things like emissions reduction, a CEJA compliance pathway, and cost caps. So to wrap up this, the IRP is a planning document. It does not authorize construction of anything. The staff is seeking council's direction on 5 guiding questions so we can make sure that what we're working on and putting together and bringing back to you all reflects what you would like to see and the questions you have. All options remain on the table until City Council decides otherwise. The final IRP will incorporate both tonight's direction and the direction from City Council and additional analysis. And then, like I said, throughout 2026, you can expect additional check-ins as we get to specific questions throughout the final IRP that warrant additional back and forth with City Council. And then again, once we have that final IRP drafted, we'll go through a whole nother public review process that we did already with this past one, public engagement sessions, Q&A, council discussions, revisions, and whatnot. And then I also want to say to all of those who submitted feedback and have taken the time throughout this project, the comments were really good, and we're able to do things based on those. So I just want to say thank you for all the comments that are actionable and thoughtful, and the level of expertise we have in our community is awesome. So that's what I have. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have throughout this process and tonight. That's all.
So does anybody on the council have any questions before we go to public comment? Alderman Fehrenbach?
Just a quick question. I feel like somewhat there's this big question around this whole thing that we're just not getting in the selection process, which is where is this thing going to go, right? I mean, these rice power plants, they're not small, right? And I feel like the location conversation needs to be part of this as well. Because I think it does play into what we select ultimately as well, right? How much space is available. I know when it comes to the industrial sites that we don't have a lot of industrial sites left, do we? I think we have like 2 left, right? Yeah, so there's that part of this as well. I think we need to kind of just acknowledge reality and pull that into this. That's the only thing that kind of jumps to mind. The other part was we did have an ask for a citizen advisory panel. I know we have people who are really interested in this. They do reach out a lot. I know several of us have met with them individually. I'm not sure, maybe we need to call that out as part of the discussion. I know we have that implied here with situations like this, but just an FYI, we have that ask on the table as well.
So to the question of location, the RFI would address what are the considerations for where and what types of size you need, what connection to the grid, and other things. So that's something that is part of an RFI, but to specifically identify locations when this is a plan, what we would likely do if council did choose to move forward with any specific resource is to study that specific resource and do detailed modeling of that, look at procurement, look at where we would put it. But that's certainly a conversation we can have.
We're going to speak to the other ask about the task force, citizen advisory group, whatever name you want to give it. But as Alderperson Fehrenbach spoke about, several of us have met with individuals in the community who are really interested in having different perspectives come to the table, people that are in the industry, people that might not be in the industry, but different voices at the table to dissect this information and make it more palatable to those of us on council. I will go on record and say I am not an expert in this field. I've learned a lot these past 2 months, but that's 3 months. That's not that much compared to people who are experts in this field. And so personally, I would feel more comfortable having people that know more about this and explaining this, and what you do and in your presentations that you give us are very helpful. I don't think it's bad to have more people look at it and give us even further information on it.
So we've met with a number of groups as well and had a number of conversations. This is a council decision about how you want to go about this. One thing that in our meetings with citizens, I did bring up that from my understanding, small groups is a part of how we got into the Prairie State mess, and how council ultimately wound up doing committees as a whole and getting rid of smaller committees. I obviously was not here for that, but those are conversations that you can have as city council about how you want to go about this, whether you want to put together with the environmental commission or otherwise. That's obviously your call.
It's my understanding a commission is different than a task force.
However you would like to approach it is ultimately it's council's decision about what they feel they need as part of this IRP process.
My understanding with the task force, they have a charter specific to this project that outlines, the timeline of how long these discussions will take place, identifies the objectives, and they come back to council with some of us involved. From what I've been told, it can look like a few key staff members, a few council members, some resident ratepayers, and including individuals that are experts in those fields of energy, engineering, environmental, and those of us on council that have that background as well would be preferred. And these individuals would meet, and depending on what the charter states and what we come up with as a council, then they could come back to us and really do the deep dive and lay out the important facts for us to understand. I don't know how council feels about that. I'm supportive of this. I think it's important for us to be more informed. More information is good for me.
Sofa.
Yeah, I'm fine with getting more information and having, public comment and public input. But I mean, this is what our job is. It's what city council's job is. We make the decisions. It's not them. So I don't really think, as Max just alluded to, having these bunch of smaller committees being formed for specific projects, especially one that doesn't really have a definitive start time or end time, is not something that I think we should do. I have no problem with getting input from, anybody who has expertise in this in the community and having them come to every meeting. That's what we're here for. I mean, we have a lot of people here today that are probably going to want to talk and give us information. I don't see why we would have to have a task force created for this. I don't see it, and I don't know. Then we have this situation where we have non-elected individuals who would be trying, I don't know what their role would be exactly. So that's why I don't want a task force. Everybody can come down to committee meetings and provide all the input and information they want.
Can I just respond since you kind of asked a question? What I was understanding that it to be is not giving us the recommendations, but giving us more information for us to make that decision, a better informed decision for council. We would make the decision. Which
I believe that the community can give to us by simply emailing, calling, or just coming to meetings and giving their own presentations on what their views are.
Yeah, this is a daunting task. This is a lot you're asking of us. Specifically on the idea of a commission or a task force, I think there is value in there. We rely on commissions for active transportation. We rely on commissions for historic preservation. We rely on commissions for tree preservation. I think it makes sense for us to have some sort of standing commission that's meeting forever, that is thinking about our energy policy. We own a utility, we run a utility, and that's a big task. We should have some people who kind of every month sit down and think about, is our utility running the way it should? We own part of a coal power plant. We're digging dirt out of the ground and burning it. We're thinking of buying part of a nuclear plant, not really thinking about it, but like conceptually thinking about it. We're thinking about some pretty heavy infrastructure. I think it makes sense, and I think it's prudent to create an additional mechanism to provide not only community input, special interest input, elected official input, and we do that all the time. So on that, regarding our 4 questions, I assume we're going to circle back to each of those and have individual discussions? Yes. Okay, because each one of these could be hours long, and there's a lot of opinions that go into it. The last comment I'll make is that process is as important as the technology, right? What we decide to put in here is important, but also how we get there, and that we ensure that the people who have entrusted us with their power and their electricity have as much say in it. So I think it's really important that we take this public comment component of it pretty seriously, and we really consider kind of what the community's gone out and said to us on that.
Can you finally open it up to the public, please?
Well,
Sir,
I explained this at the beginning of the meeting, that we were going to have a presentation from Max. We were going to discuss what we wanted to discuss.
How close are you to being done? Because what I'm hearing is totally ineffective. what's happened in the last.
Sir, you can't speak unless you come up to the mic.
Right, so-
Moving forward.
Right.
Actually, you can't speak because it's not your meeting.
Yes.
Not public
You need to sit
When
down.
we are ready to take public comment,
Why was I invited here?
When the public-
90 days ago.
There'll be a moment
You
later.
submitted a
There'll
bunch
be a
of
moment later.
replies.
We follow Robert's Rules of Order, and you are out of order.
Okay, so there's no chance of us speaking for another.
When we say,
We're told to be here like 7:30, it's coming up on 9 o'clock, and there's no chance of
welcome
us.
to our world, sir.
we were here 3.5 hours last week. So this is what happens in a public process. And we
They're coming to more,
will
trust me.
listen.
Not much effective things have happened in the last 90 days. That's what I'm here.
Alderman Malay?
Thank you. I fully support both a commission and for the long run, because yes, we do own a public utility that's worth quite a bit of money. There's a lot of decisions that have to come up. I have a full-time job. I don't do this full-time. This is a big commitment for me to, and it's a struggle to stay on top of things. I'll be the first. This IRP, we should have an ad hoc committee. Again, following Robert's rules, we'd have standing committees, an ad hoc committee to address this specifically. A committee of 14 trying to, it's not feasible for us to have as close a communication with the Brattle Group, who's supposedly advising us, and we're paying a lot of money for it. I think a commission, or not a commission, an ad hoc task force, if you will, would be better suited to have those more intimate conversations and communications with the Brattle Group to produce the best possible IRP that our community deserves. So I would fully support a commission for the long term, but also an ad hoc committee task force specifically for the IRP.
Thank you. Max, if I'm understanding, this is the first IRP that we'll be having to put out, but in a couple years, we're going to be going through this exact same process again. Is that correct?
State law requires municipal utilities to do an IRP every 5 years. So yes, we will do this at least in 5 years, if not sooner, if council directs us otherwise.
Okay, so the way I look at it is this is going to be an ongoing thing, and kind of along the lines of what Alderperson Malone mentioned, I think, for us to have a commission that will act as an advisor to us, very similar to our active transportation. I think that's going to be effective because these are people that can come in and out and they can provide what their recommendations are as we go through different aspects of this. So I think that's something that, as a council, we could really take a look at. The email that Alderperson Barraza sent, she definitely had some concerns about that. And I think that where we're at as far as the discussion, to put together a task force for where we're at, I think the commission is going to be more suited because this is something we're going to need moving forward to support our utility.
On paper?
I would also add to that, I feel like a commission could be useful for the next studies as well, with infrastructure and with rate studies and like that, because that is going to be a very continual process. Would they even be possibly useful for the other utilities, like make it a broad utility commission so that they would have more of a regular scope of things? Because there will be a bit of a lull between this process and the next IRP a few years down the line. So widening that a little bit to cover different aspects of our utility, which is a fairly significant investment, as many have said. Having an inside track as well, being able to work more directly with staff provides a lot of benefits. And we've had a lot of success with our existing commissions. So there's certainly an opening for it, I think. Although it is another meeting for.
I just feel like
well.
that starting a task force, it's going to slow things out. So as we kind of put in the commission to kind of work forward with these different aspects that come through on that. It is a lot of information, but, it's reading that we have to do. We got elected for that.
I was also going to note a commission could be useful for informing the public of these things, being an arm of that as well, much as the Bike Commission, environmental commissions have taken on that role. So they could kind of offload a little work as well, perhaps.
Anything else? I think now we'll take some public comment. So if you can come up one at a time, all we need is your name, and then, for the record, and then give us your statement.
Harold Dinwiddie, 1156 Pine Street, right here in Batavia. First of all, if I read correctly over there, Prairie State is good until 2045? Nobody's going to shut it down before then unless
Anything is
our
possible with the state
legislature
legislature.
asks, where are we sitting today? Unless somebody changes something.
Today, we're under contract to purchase power from there till 2042, I believe. And by CJIT's 2045, it has to be carbon neutral.
Yes, and it has to have emissions in 2038.
2038, it has to cut them in half.
And so that's the period 2038 to 2041 that represents a risk specifically.
That's the biggest risk so far.
Okay. I'm from pre-NIMPA days, so there was a lot of discussion back then, and one of it was we borrowed a lot of money. I think 3 little bonds of 75 million each. Where are we now at now? How much do we owe? And is this going to be part of the discussion, how we're going to pay those bonds back? Or am I missing something here?
Those bonds are paid through your electric rates that you pay. So right now, the rates that you pay includes both electric costs, transmission costs, infrastructure costs, and the bond costs. And so bond payments are part of our NIMPA contract, and those bond payments, our mortgage on the power plant, runs through 2041. After 2041, we are not making bond payments.
That's 2021.
2041.
2041.
Yes,
Okay.
that's when the bonds end.
That needs to be part of the discussion, how we're going to pay off the bonds or whatever this new initiative will be, right?
If we have to pay for both.
Pardon me?
If we have to pay for both, then that will be a problem. If we're still paying for power from Prairie State, it'll go on just like it is today.
And I've heard about various ideas about a commission and how to approach this. I guess I should say, the mayor has pointed this out before, we're a strong council and a weak mayor, a weak mayor form of government. The other thing is, my understanding, not to offend anybody, administration's job is to answer questions to the council, give the council information, and not exactly to try to direct the council. I say this seems like a slam, like trying to take some of the authority away from the council. This is yours, of course, you know that. Maybe I'm speaking to the choir. The other thing, if you have a commission, now I'm going to stick my nose in it. This is so big, I can't even reach that high because it's going to be long-term. Whatever's decided, the residents of Batavia might have to live with for 25 years, whatever's decided. And plus, every one of us has an electric bill that we have to pay, which is going to affect us. So where I'm headed with this, my last year working on my economics degree, we talked a lot about public choice. Representative government is terrific almost in all cases, but in this case, this is so big, I think when you get through deciding what the options are, I think it needs to go to referendum to all the residents in Batavia, give them, this is what we think the options are, and this is our rationale, plus and minus behind them. I think this is too big for a council vote. I think public choice, the decision should be in the hands of the citizens of Batavia, whatever you come up with. And I want to piggyback, I know I'm speaking too much here, but it's a moving target, as they say in the bureaucratic world. There's a lot of moving parts, a lot of balls in the air, a lot of technology changing. It's going to be a challenge to come up with the right answer. But I'll just repeat, whatever options you come up with, I would like to see a referendum on this and let the citizens decide, because we're the ones going to have to pay the bill, live with power failures or whatever. Thank you.
who's next?
Good evening.
Whatever you want to
I can't see over the monitor. I don't have prepared marks, but I wanted to just address a couple of things that we were talking about tonight. I think it's important for you to understand the statute under which this IRP is purportedly being in compliance with. I know that it has been mentioned multiple times that we are following the newly passed statute, even though this process began before compliance was required. And the statute, of course, allows more time than what you're currently under, or the time frame that you're currently under, isn't applicable under the statute. But we've been hearing a lot about the process that the statute requires, but very little about what the substance of the statute requires. And I think it's important to review that substance because it says that a utilities IRP is to include information about that utility's current portfolio, which is our Prairie State portfolio, and all resources reasonably available and reasonably likely to be available during the next 5 years, taking into account both supply side and demand side electric power resources and costs and benefits. It's a very broad statute. It's a very broad language that is used within that statute. And what I have a problem with in the presentation tonight is that staff is asking you very specific questions. They're asking you what types of hybrid portfolios you want to include in the statute. I don't know if any of you even know what kind of hybrid portfolios there are out there. That is not your job, in my opinion. They're asking you what types of demand side programs you want to prioritize and fast track or even consider. That's not your job. This statute, the way it is set up, is broad enough where Brattle is supposed to be providing to you options that you then will consider, which are more appropriate for our particular situation. And I know several of us brought to your attention an IRP that was done for Orlando. And I know that the Brattle Group can do something very similar. They should be looking at all resources reasonably available or likely to be available, and all types of demand side and supply side electric power resources. It's your responsibility to make sure that Brattle follows your policy, and that policy said that you are going to look for resources and programs that were going to prioritize resiliency, sustainability, affordability, and adaptability. That's what you need to make sure Brattle does. That's basically the type of guidance that you need to tell them to include in the revised IRP. And I think you have to look at the draft that was done and its shortcomings and its, dare I say, deficiencies are because they did not follow that policy in its entirety. They looked at affordability and they looked at reliability, and that was it. But as we had pointed out, the Orlando IRP and what we are kind of looking for here is for Brattle to give to you a multitude, several, 5 to 7, maybe even 8 types of portfolios to look at, and they're all weighted by how resilient, how sustainable, how affordable, and how resilient those portfolios are. And then you make a choice as to which one you are going to pursue or which one you plan to pursue within the next 5 years or so. So I think that staff is trying to micromanage this situation. I know, Mr. Sulfa, you mentioned how you were concerned about a task force being an unelected party and giving advice, but that's what we have here with staff. And I think I'm very concerned that staff, too, is getting and looking at this in too broad a terms by working to better align climate and sustainability considerations with portfolio evaluation. What expertise does your staff have to do that? You hired Brattle to do that. Staff plans to explore hybrid portfolios in the final IRP. No, you hired Brattle to do that, not staff. So you have to set some parameters here. This is a very complicated topic. It is far more complicated than anything else that comes before this city council. And what we are asking for as citizens is for you to establish a task force, not a commission. You do not have a time to set up a commission. And you don't have time for that commission to give you advice that you may not follow. You need a task force comprised of a relatively small group of people, 8 or so, maybe 10 at the very most, that includes staff and the professional expertise that they bring to the table. That includes a couple of your members, and that includes concerned, knowledgeable citizens and ratepayers who can look at this IRP, look at what kinds of assumptions has it made in its draft, how is it conforming or not conforming to the statute, and what kinds of gaps does the revised draft that it's going to be producing, what are those gaps and how should Brattle be told to address those? And as Ms. Lohman mentioned, we are not asking for this task force to make recommendations to you. We are asking that this task force do the sorting for you. Take that burden off your shoulders at looking at this technical information and compiling some factual information in a manner that will give all of you the same playbook, instead of one person seeing this and another person seeing that, and this one worried about that, and another one worried about another thing. You'll have some basic facts, basic problems, basic information about what the future final draft should look like, and then you can make some direction and make some decision and give Brattle some direction on where they are supposed to go with this whole process. That's what we're looking for. And I think that that can be done in fairly short order within the, 2, 3, 4, 5-month time frame that, all this is going to be done. It would be an ad hoc type of task force for this purpose only. And then if you think that you need a commission to deal with the utility in the future, great. Maybe at that point in time, then you can make that kind of a decision to do that. But I think you need to have a common set of understandings about this IRP and the direction it's going in. I think the way the draft was written has some deficiencies because it was very narrowly crafted. It was designed to address one question and one question only, and that was, how are we going to reduce the risks of buying power on the peak market? And that's, again, not what the statute says. Now, if you don't want to follow the statute, technically you don't have to. But then you're going to have to do another IRP within the time frame of the statute. So keep in mind that this statute is broad. You are to look at all resources reasonably available or likely to be available and take into consideration both supply side and demand side programs. So please, I urgently ask that you consider this task force and set one up in a timely and reasonable manner. Thank you.
Can I ask a question? Max, is the RFI supposed to address some of these concerns that were brought up by Ms. Russo, where we are framing those options that will then be presented to us?
It can. The RFI could look at things like emissions, how different portfolios emissions compare, timelines. That's kind of what I attempted to address with, you can set criteria that you would like to see addressed and answered as part of an RFI. And to address another point, when I say staff, I mean staff working with Brattle. In case if that's not clear, we are working with them. We're not like doing the analysis ourselves. So when I say staff will evaluate, we're going to go back to Brattle, work with them based on the feedback you provide. And then to address some of the comments about where the IRP may have fell short, that was evident through public comment, both from what residents provided, some of the private meetings we've had, one-on-ones, and otherwise. We've been provided the Orlando IRP. We have reviewed that. We are intending to model that more as part of the final IRP because feedback on it was very good about it being a good way to present the information. And so that is an intent to better model it off of what that IRP showed.
So as things are presented to us, we're recognizing where there's deficiencies, where we can definitely build that up before the final IRP, lessons learned moving forward type of thing.
We definitely acknowledge that there's room to improve. That's evident within how we responded, some of the things that I've attempted to share that we have already committed to doing as part of the final IRP. And to the extent that council has additional direction, we will follow that direction entirely.
Yeah, just keep it quick. I mean, so obviously there's dissatisfaction with the deliverable we got from the Brattle Group. The deliverable has been given to the public. Public's come back and said this is deficient. I mean, it happens all the time. Usually what we do is we go back to the vendor and say, hey, you know what, here's the commentary we got in your deliverable. How do we remediate this? Is this something we need to pay you extra for? Are you going to take it as part of your original fee? And then we take and tie it back to the original SOW. So what I hate to, part of this feels like the majority of people who read the deliverable feel it's a poor deliverable, and now they're basically offering to do the work themselves, where part of me is like, hey, some of this stuff should Braille have done this originally, and can we at least try to put it back on them to take some of the heat off of this, and, because they're not cheap. We're getting a fair amount of cash.
Well, that's kind of where I felt Max was going earlier with some of the questions that were there and going back and basing the deliverables or different deliverables as accordance with what we adopted as an energy policy already, and that, I don't know if that wasn't clearly stated enough in their original scope of work or what, but that to me was the biggest thing. When it came back with kind of a one source answer about how we hedge our bet, I didn't like that at all. I want a handful of them, because I think that's one of the things. I was here during Prairie State, so I know how we ended up in tunnel vision, and that can never happen again. And because this is an IRP that's really state mandated, but we saw the value in it and wanted to start this early so we could figure out how we can best position ourselves to be able to be flexible, to change the plan when necessary or when required. Those are two different things. And be able to realize that we have to take whatever's available to us, whether it's from the public, whether it's an ad hoc committee, a commission, whatever gets decided in the future, that we have to be able to have that information presented to us. So the 14 of us who get elected every 2 years to represent the people in Batavia, that's how the process works. And that's, yes, this is probably the biggest decision we'll have till we get to fighting over water in the next decade, because that's going to be the big fight. This reality right now is we are under a time constraint to do this. I think we take all of the information that we've gotten from the public, what we've just gone over here tonight, we put that back into, the Brattle mixer or staff, however we want to describe it, and we move forward to the next meeting with the input we have and try to put things out there that make sense to what we've talked about, what we've heard from the public, what we've heard from, industry experts, from concerned citizens, from ratepayers, from my wife. All that stuff has to be included into this so that we can make what we hope is the best decision. I was back in the other room when we made a lot of closed door decisions to get to the point where we went into Prairie State. And looking back on it, there needed to be more information. And I think that we've learned that already, getting to this point, trying to get out of Prairie State, all the things that have happened, in the last decade or decade and a half have changed radically. I see this changing radically again in the next 5 or 10 years. There are going to be things that happen that we have no idea how that's going to affect us. Every election, federal, state, will affect this. So, we have to be ready, and we have to listen and find out and get as much information as we can before we make a decision. And I think that's something, when we first laid this out and when we first heard about the legislation coming out of the state to require an IRP, we're like, okay, there's 3 meetings, there's 5 meetings, there's 10 meetings, we're done. And I don't think, at least in my mind, that any of us up here thought that that was going to be all of it. We never do that way in Batavia. We try to have as much public comment, as much integration as we can to get things done. I mean, in the time I've been on the council, we've had more commissions, more committees, other things that have helped the council make decisions. And when we do take all that information and try to disseminate it to everybody and then get a good decision, it usually works out the best. So I'm all for that. I just don't know the way history has been to set up, a commission. That's going to take a lot more than we have time for. An ad hoc committee can do what the public is doing for us right now by getting us information, by giving their opinions, by finding studies, by sharing all that information so that we can make a good decision. And I'm not afraid of us slowing this process down. I mean, a couple of meetings that I had publicly with other, people that are concerned about this, that's, to me, is not a fear that I have. We need to figure out what's the right thing to put into this plan, so that way we don't have to do it in 2 years. We don't have to do it in 3 years. We can wait the 5 years to have to do it again, unless technology or legislation changes. Then we might be doing it in a year, 2, 5, I don't know. Alderman Anderson?
Just one quick question. We say time constraints. What does the statute require us to actually submit this? Like, what is that? I know we're trying to do it ahead of that, but.
Right. It comes into.
I think it says you have to have one, it's either the start of 27 or the end of 27. I can double check as to what that is, but you have to have an IRP, I think, completed in 27. I'll double check in that and get back to you.
I'm in 27. I don't have the statute in front of me. I know that it goes in as effective law, I believe June or July this year is when it goes into effect. And then from that point, that starts the clock for everybody else that hasn't started like we did, which, knowing what I know of the process already, I can't imagine what other cities are going to have to do that have to deal with this, or other entities that have to deal with this.
I think it'd be important to know if it's early January or end of 27 or end of 27. That's a long time for us to have some more discussions. So
we're trying to figure that out now. Is there anybody else in the public that'd like to come up and address this? Come on up.
Hi, I'm Karen Brooker. I'm on Thoria Road. I'll try to be brief. One of my concerns with the preliminary IRP was that it seemed to already be relying on what could be potentially outdated assumptions. Right now, our situation is really fluid. It's fluid at the state and federal level with policy. It's fluid with pricing. I think that having an ad hoc task force that involves well-informed and specialized citizens can really help be that source of good information that maybe we can't get from Brattle because it's proprietary, and also because it would be kind of, available on an ongoing basis and not just periodically through a report. That's all I wanted to say.
Yep. Come on up.
As while he's walking up, I looked it up. It's January 1st, 2027.
What is the first?
Yep, the first.
It needs to be done, implemented?
That's what it says, and every 5 years thereafter, on or before January 1, all, yes, blah, blah, blah. So.
Okay. Pat McVeigh on Maple Avenue. I'm not here to beat you up. I'm here to at least tell you more about me and what my experience has been when you're in really serious issues that you feel like the weight of the world is on you. It's better to have a little bit more humor in the process than all the seriousness. It makes you think better. And after 35 years of being an engineering consultant, working in biomedical engineering, which is a very serious subject when it comes to what the Food and Drug Administration want and what hospitals need, I find that it's easier if you can keep it light. So therefore, when I talk to people, it becomes more of an education rather than a lecture. And I'm not here to lecture you. What I want to do is be able to provide information. And I've tried to do that. I sent an email out with an attachment of my latest missive, which had a long title. It was called Software plus Advanced Power Meters plus DERs equals DERMS, with an arrow pointing to, which means going to a utility VPP. Now, there's an example of utility speak. I think it really demonstrates how these subjects can get very complex very quickly. And therefore, it's incumbent people like me to at least try to break it down into something manageable that you can make decisions on. And I think an advisory committee or commission or a task force or whatever you call it needs to have the ability to simplify and to make things easier for you as a city council to make some decisions. So let's just make it easier on ourselves and stop worrying too much. I think it can be worked out. That's really what I'm talking about. And just, I want to point out some things that there was a link to from Energy Central that had a one-page document called Direct Comparison Guide launches a VPP versus building a new power plant. That's essentially what they were comparing, a virtual power plant versus a new power plant. And they referenced the Brattle Group, which they state, and the Brattle Group stated that a traditional power plant is more than 40 to 60% more expensive than a virtual power plant. Well, that's pretty straightforward. And I think that, you know, we have to get to that kind of statement if we want to at least make a decision. If Brattle could do that in that report they provided to another utility, why can't they do it for us? So that's all I have to really say. Thank you.
Real quick, do you know what a virtual power plant is? Because I didn't. Would you like to explain what a virtual power plant is?
Cliff
notes.
As simple as I can make it. A virtual power plant is an accumulation or a group of distributed energy resources. Now, that's only one step, but a distributed energy resource can either be behind the meter or in front of the meter. That's another little thing that is different from other things that you run into. So all it means is it could be a battery, it could be your solar system that you have on top of your roof in your house. It could be a hot water heater that runs on a heat pump. So these are behind the meter units. In front of the meter unit, it could be a set of batteries, a battery pack, or a large community-based solar. So that's the kind of thing that is really what we're talking about here. And it makes it easier for using a little computer and a power meter made by Itron. You use Itron meters on your houses right now. If you can put this all together, you have a system that can draw on power that each and every one of these houses potentially could have in the city of Batavia. That's what it means.
Yeah, at peak times, you would actually pull from different sources, a non-centralized power plant. But it would require the demand side.
And one thing I'll address on that is that kind of gets to some of the softwares that I do allude to within the presentation and within the IRP is that so like you mentioned, we do use those meters that are able to read remotely and whatnot. We've also put in a software system called Tantalus that allows us to kind of start that out. But to get to that point that you're discussing and those demand response programs, we know we need to procure some new software. And so that was some of the stuff that, I alluded to a grant that we're going to be applying for to help us try to plan demand side response programs, because that will help us identify what we need to get in place, what we would need to put in to do all those programs that there's pretty strong demand for, both amongst council, but also the community as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to it, but on the other hand, you can break it down into small pieces and it makes it easier to understand. And the one thing that's attractive about DER is it attracts the community to participate, and there are incentives because they get payments associated with the resources that they have. If you can just draw on them and draw them in, I think it really helps them to understand and to participate.
Absolutely. And one of the things that would likely be included as part of that study is how we get the community involved. You can stand up a demand response program, but if people aren't participating, it's not going to be useful and it's not going to meet the results that you expect it to get. So that's what we would do as part of this, next step if council chooses to really aggressively pursue demand response, would be how do we make that all happen? How do we get the community involved and whatnot as well?
Well, I'd like to participate. That's why I'm standing up here. So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else? Come on up.
I'll be really quick. Where can I get these slides?
They're online on the city
website.
To whom do I address my questions, and what's the time horizon for?
Could you repeat your name into the microphone, please?
Oh, sorry, Tim Lyons.
Tim Lyons, thank you.
So when is the horizon for 30 days, 2 days, and to whom should I address my questions?
If you have questions, you can reach out to me and I'll get a response. My name is Max Weiss.
Okay,
I can get you
your email address.
Yeah, reach out. We'll get an answer.
I don't need an FOI request or anything like that?
No, not at all.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Right, that was short.
We like those. Yeah. Okay, so is there anybody else that would like to speak? I guess we need to make some, not real decisions, but direction to go for what will be the next meeting in this process.
So back to the having a task force. Prime example that we just saw here. I learned something new. Thanks for bringing that up, Bob. This is too much for 14 people to discuss and learn about new things on the spot. A task force could be working with staff and the Brattle Group to get this kind of information and package it and bring it to us then. Not for us to look at, I'm looking at their executive summary. And I recall that we were, in our policy, sustainability was very important. The environment is very important to us. And it just got ignored. It's not in there. In the executive summary anyway, they basically tell us that the natural gas prices are going up, and they are. They're gonna, with this war going on, you're gonna see some real increases. Imagine if we just took their advice right off the bat, where we would have found ourselves if we did it real quick. But the solution is, well, the gas prices are gonna go up, and it's going to get more expensive for fossil fuels, but you can protect, your problem you have is your capacity. You don't have a problem with the load because it's been steady since 2018, but your capacity, and we know this. And their solution is to go rely on fossil fuels, rely on gas. Wait a second, how much do we pay Brattle for that? There's other things out there which we just heard. In order to get that, we need to have a task group that can get together and focus and work with staff and the Brattle Group to get us those possibilities that can be, so we don't end up like what happened with one. So I think it's a committee of 14 trying to distill all this doesn't make sense. A small group, 6, 8 people, I think can be much more effective, can be get what we're paying for from the Brattle Group, because quite frankly, I wasn't impressed at all with what they brought back to us. And it did not incorporate what our policy is. And so here we are, the question, should we stick with our policy, or should we change that to meet what Brattle's talking about? Doesn't make sense to me. So I think we need a commission, or not, I understand long-term, I agree, Dustin, a long-term commission on all utilities is something we should look at. But for right now, for this IRP, we got 8 months, 9 months to have this done. A task force makes sense for that. And that I think will be the best way forward to produce the most options for us to review. Ultimately, decisions are going to be made by this council. The task force, they don't have the ability to make decisions. We have that. We're elected to do that. And that's our job, to do that. But I want to do it being most informed as I can. And I think a task force can do that. So I move we have a task force.
Yeah, first off, echo everything Alderman Millay just shared there. I think both short-term, a task force with the express mission statement. I think a mission statement is really important. Mission statement to educate council on the important points in the IRP, right? That way their job is education. They'll put together packets. They'll come give us presentations. They'll give us homework, basically. That's what I'd like from a task force. And then a commission makes a lot of sense. I don't want to spend too much more time on both of those points. I think we've talked about it. One thing I'm looking for from Brattle is I want a menu. I want a menu that I can select from. And I think Tony just spoke on this a little bit too. I didn't really get a menu. And I think that fell out from the fact that they focused primarily on reliability and affordability and kind of dropped off sustainability and adaptability. I recall, I was going back through my notes from September, when we adopted those four, I think we were pretty intentional in not weighting them so that we could then have the debate and the fight about which one we want to weigh at each time. But so when you drop two of them off, you're automatically weighting those other two more favorably. And that's not the spirit of our plan. And I think we're hearing loud and clear from the community. The only people who bothered to tell us anything were folks who wanted that in. And that tells me a lot. That tells me that that's what's going to motivate people, is making sure we're hitting all four of our items. One way to do that, it would be kind of nice if we get a menu of options from Brattle, which is their specialty, and they're very good at that. And so I know they can do it. If they could put some sort of metric in there, like this is 5 stars on affordability, but 1 star on sustainability and 2 stars on reliability, whatever, right? So that way I have some metrics specific to our policy that allow me to make those decisions. And last thing, and now we're kind of getting into the questions, which I think are good questions and important questions to look at, but it's got to include demand side. I think aggressively pursuing demand side solutions is sort of I'm going to use heavy quotes here, but cheap, quick, right? And heavy quotes, cheap and quick, sort of ways to make some small impacts towards our goal. And I think we need to pretty heavily be looking at those options. It opens up virtual power plants, but that may be, who knows how far down the line. But it also just gives relief to our citizens today, right? If they can save some bucks by having supply terms escaping me, where you pay less when the energy is cheaper, right? Time of use rates. If we can have time of use rates, great. That's going to save people cash. It's also going to help our environment. It's also going to add to reliability. It's going to hit A, B, C, D, bam. So I think that demand side stuff is pretty important here. I am excited to go into each question, though. I know we're pushing the Lehman rule here, but
hasn't been invoked yet. Alderman Fehrenbach.
Yeah, I'll keep it quick. So we paid Brattle Group $385,000, based on what I'm looking at here. The team was billing between $710 an hour and $375 an hour. Given those rates, given that amount, it's very normal to go back and say, thank you for your first proposal. Here are the changes you need to make, right? And I feel like that hasn't happened here. And now Susan and crew and the public's doing it for us, right? So I say we just, and this used to be my jam. I mean, this is what I did for years and years. We should just go back and just say, hey, look, here are the changes we need you to make, and just let them make them. And we don't have to. I know we're willing to go on a journey of discovery around electricity and everything, but we're paying these folks enough. They're the experts, and they build very generously. All right. So I think it's okay to go back and say, thank you. This is version 1. Here's what we need in version 2, and then it's on them.
And much more on the 4 points of our policy.
Yeah.
That has to be incorporated in that, and that there have to be options. And not just the cheapest or the most reliable, but again, something that shows weighted choices that we would have. Lancy?
Yeah, I'll just throw my 2 cents in. Is I'm an all of the above guy. I mean, I couldn't agree with Jim more. I couldn't agree with these guys more. I think long term, we probably need a commission. I mean, having our own utility is a big deal. There's a lot of overhead there. There's a lot, I mean, everything. It's just a big deal in general that most towns don't have to worry about. Now that I'm thinking about it, kind of surprised we don't have one already, but probably a good idea long term. And then absolutely a task force to help in the short term, if we need it, depending on how it comes back, like what Jim's saying. I mean, we have a lot of input so far from everybody, and I really appreciate everyone coming down and putting your 2 cents in. But again, let's take it back and say, hey guys, because I'm no expert in this stuff, and I gotta say though, I was of the same opinion. I was a little lackluster. Like, wait a minute, what are we paying you for? Like, could have had a lot of people put this thing together. Straight up, AI could have done that. So, I'm doing full scopes of work out of Grok now. So like this, I'm just saying that you could have probably put that together via Grok, but I'll leave it at that.
Alderman Lehman.
I agree. I think a task force for this particular situation makes a lot of sense. This is a really unique and important topic for us. I mean, we own our own utility, and so I think our IRP is going to look a lot different than a lot of other communities in Illinois even. And we have a unique weight and responsibility to do it correctly. And I think everybody sitting in this room and everybody who is participating in this conversation, I think we're all on the same page. We want to stay away from forever contracts. We learned our lesson with Prairie State. We know how vulnerable our electric utility can be and how technologies change. So I think we're all on the same page to be flexible and adaptable and to avoid anything that locks us into a future that we can't get out of. So I'm not concerned that this task force will be a repeat of what happened at with the Prairie State discussion. I think, I support and I look at these people in this room and I know that their motives are good, and when they challenge stuff here, sometimes that can be hard maybe for staff to hear, but that challenge is important because it helps us think better and think clearer. And so I think we just need to keep that in mind and just continue working forward and moving in a good direction with this.
Thanks, Alan. I think this process is working the way that it's supposed to be. We set out onto a new direction that we were given no guidelines for, and we're learning from it. So we put something out that nobody's really happy with. So now we're giving the feedback and to kind of go along with Jim's, let's send it back to Brattle and see what they have. If they come back and fail us again, then maybe at that point, we do consider doing the task force. But I think that this process is working exactly the way it was designed because there's nobody else in Illinois right at this point that are probably at the point that we are at. There's no guideline. I asked when I met with the group, I said, where's our guidebook? And there was none. And so we're learning from that. And so we shouldn't beat ourselves up because maybe we got something lackluster. Okay, it wasn't great. People aren't happy with it. Let's send it back with the feedback and say, give us something more. Give us options, give us the playbook, show us what the money that we're paying to you is. And I think then at that point, we can move forward seeing what this next round comes. I think we give them that opportunity because they are a consultant and we give them that feedback. I think if we don't give them that feedback and give them that chance and we just go immediately to a task force, it's going to look bad on us as alder people for future contractors, because they're going to say, you only get one chance with this group.
Just as a point of clarification, kind of going off of that, this being a draft IRP, there is the expectation that revisions would be made in the original contract, right?
Absolutely.
This wouldn't be an additional ask. This is part of the contract.
Yeah, and that's why we've tried to have these discussions so we can give that pointed specific feedback to say, make these changes. Whether that's sharing the Orlando IRP and say, model it off, like take this as an example, model it off of this and how you communicate it. Or here's examples we've seen elsewhere, use that. So that's the intent, is to take all the public comment, all the comments from you all, the meetings and the discussions we have, and say, here's all the feedback. You need to address all of this within your IRP and what you're drafting for us. And we expect all those things to be addressed. And that's why we've got all this feedback. You put out the preliminary IRP. We've collected a ton of feedback. That's all going to go back to Brattle and say, we need to address this. There's comments about this didn't align close enough with our climate policy, loud and clear. There was 40 something, 50 comments on that. Same with things like all these things are loud and clear, will be shared with them, and expected that those will be modified.
Go ahead.
I would like to piggyback on Max and just let you guys know that we meet with them every other week. Typically, our next meeting we had to shift, so we'll be meeting with them Monday afternoon. It's typically an hour meeting. While this was out, we continued to move on, so we're working on our cost of service. There are lots of back and forth, as well as Max, it's Steve, Laura, myself, Peggy. We're all involved in this. We have had a little bit of a scope change at one point because I think we started this process prior to all the legislation being passed to get a leg up, so everything wasn't formalized. So that was, I think, the only scope change that we had within this process right now, but we do go back and give them comments. We question things. We share all the feedback that we get from you guys. I know Max is constantly giving them all this information that has gone out. So if you guys ever have questions, do not hesitate to reach out and ask us. We are in constant communication with them throughout this process.
So, yeah, I think the task force would not be any replacement for coming up with different plans. It would be working with staff and council and the Brattle Group I think it would create more transparency. I think it can, instead of everything having to filter through a few people, we can have a commission that's, or not a commission, a task force that can be working with. So we got 9 months left. And we got some, bring those that are, everyone those that are passionate about this together so we can get to the best possible IRP plan or IRP. So I think it's not a replacement for what the contract we had with Brattle. Of course not. That, we're paying a lot of money for that. It's about bringing more ideas to the table and more perspectives instead of, yes, we've been going through a process, but this is a very complicated thing. And that process that we're using is very cumbersome and takes a long time. We don't have a lot of time right now. So I highly recommend and believe that the best way forward is to put a commission together. So we're not spinning our wheels like I feel we're doing a bit of, we got, how long have we had this report now? We're just at this point and really not making any real decisions because we really don't have stuff on the table that we can make decisions about. Not the stuff that we thought we were going to get. So I think bringing our constituents that are passionate about this into being part of the actual process with Brattle is going to serve us best and be more transparent.
And it's worth noting, it's been discussed, part of this task force might include a few of us as well, so we would get more direct feedback from that process to be able to share with other members of council and, just kind of help self-regulate a little bit as well, just among our own selves.
So really quick, so I'm looking at the SOW here. Okay, so they said they're 80%, they would be 80% done by now, right? And so now we're in March, and from March and April, what's left according to the SOW is going to be prepare the IRP study report. So maybe next time we talk to Brad, I'll just get, hey, when is version 2, when is the updated report getting delivered with our feedback? Let's just treat it like if you're building a house.
Right, and I was going to say 1 month. Max has got direction from what happened here tonight, and what we've talked about, questions that we want answered, things that we want added to it, the application of our energy policy that we adopted, the 4 tenants in that has to be part of whatever is suggested moving forward, whatever type of, handful of choices that we'll have, not just one, that has to be part of it. And my thought is, in that interim, if we really desire to have a task force to finish the rest of this, then we decide how that's set up. How many members from council, who from staff, who from the public? Because I don't think that's something we're going to decide in the next 14 minutes.
And what the scope of that is.
Right, and we have to state a scope to it. If we don't do that, I think we'd be better off just taking input from residents. If that means we have to have a couple more COW meetings, I don't know if you'll like it, but I'd say yes. Because if we're going to do it, and we're going to do it right, I don't want to limit that. And if we can't come to an agreement on what the actual scope would be for the task force, I just want the information from them. And, I think we've all said tonight, I haven't heard anybody say they were happy with Brattle's first draft. And, the things that we've identified tonight need to be part of a revision and need to be something that's included in the scope of work that we've given them, because that's what we want. And that's what we're going to need to base, a useful IRP off of.
I agree. Getting a task force together in 14 minutes isn't going to happen. However, we have a COW meeting next week, and instead of waiting to see and then creating it, I think we should start that process of creating that task force. Maybe we don't need it in the end, but at least we're not finding ourselves 2 months down the road. Yeah, I guess we need a task force. Let's start the process, determine what the mission is. And so we can start selecting who's going to be on that task force, the makeup and the charge for an ad hoc committee. So I would like to see that on the next, on Tuesday, the 24th council committee of the whole meeting. If someone will join me on that.
I would join on that.
Do you have an idea, Max, what's already on there?
I don't at this time. I can certainly look. We did add earlier the housing discussion as well. So now we've got those 2 on there as well. I do want to ask about what the direction to staff is here for going back to Brattle and all of that. We can certainly request those revisions that you've made rather clear, express some of that displeasure you have with the product you were given, and looking for some direction on what you want to see us share with Brattle, and we'll obviously send them this discussion as well so they can.
Yeah, I was just going to.
Yeah, no, we'll send it, but being really clear, kind of wrapping things up. What is that direction?
Yeah, that's what I kept waiting for us to go back to the 5 questions. So, to give my feedback, I'll kick us off on the 5 questions. I'd like to see resiliency, sustainability, affordability, adaptability, and feasibility, because they can design anything they want, but if it's not physically feasible for the city of Batavia, who cares? We're not going to be the best solar plant in the world with our weather compared to Orlando. I only pick on Orlando because they've come up 10 other times tonight. Do we want a broader range of clean portfolios? Yes. Give us our smorgasbord that we're looking for. We want that menu. How aggressively should we pursue demand side management? Yes. Things like virtual power plant, we can't do without that. Things like charging your electric car in the middle of the night instead of when peak air conditioning is in the afternoon. You can't do it without time of use. So I definitely think we should do that. How should we address the NIMPA, too many acronyms, PSEC transition risk? I'll leave that up to other people that are more knowledgeable. And the scope is too generic of an answer. So I'll give time back.
Yeah, I mean, you took my shtick. I was going to do the same thing, just quickly.
Waiting for us to go back.
Bullet point each one. But, question number one, how should the final RIP address the energy policy? I think we got to hit all four. If we're not hitting all four, it's a failure. The overarching point I want to make, Max alluded to this. It was brought up, I believe Ms. Russo brought it up as well. Everywhere it says staff in these questions, I would like it to read Brattle. I want to make that clear. I want Brattle to answer these questions. I want them to tell me what a clean portfolio looks like. I want them to tell me what our priorities look like, not because I don't love staff, you guys are great, but because Brattle is literally the experts. All right, so number one, it's got to hit all four, so that would be A on your list there. Question two, does the broader range of clean portfolio? Yes, I want a broader range of clean portfolio. My approach, my intent is to have a menu. I want a menu, and I want that menu to be mostly clean, because we have the Strait of Hormuz being mined, because our oil producers are going to sell to Europe, who has a shortage, instead of to me, even if it's a halfway across the world, right? That reduces our exposure to international conflict if we have a broader clean portfolio. And sometimes maybe it doesn't make sense. I don't know, but put it on my plate. How aggressively should we do demand side? I think I said this before. I think demand side is key. Demand side is absolutely vital. We have to be pretty aggressive on demand side. Especially short term, while we're waiting for Gen 3 nuclear to come online, we can still get smart thermostats in. We can do that. Should it address the NIMPA? Item C seems the most important to me. We have to be super proactive, I think, with Prairie State shutting down. We need to have several off-ramps ready to go, bad off-ramps and good off-ramps. We need ideal scenarios and bad scenarios, because we really don't know what the coal scenario is going to look like. We have these shut-off timelines, but they could be moved, they could disappear, they could be there. We need to know what that looks like, even if there's a lot of uncertainty in there. Uncertainty is okay when we're talking about options for Prairie State, because it's such a big part of our portfolio. We should know kind of what everything goes. And then what should the scope of the all resource RFI be? I'm going to be honest, I kind of don't understand that question. And that's where I think a commission, not the task force. I think task force is great for short term, and I'm all pro task force. And a job of the task force could be, how does a commission get set up and what does a commission do? That could be another job we can give these folks. But that's the sort of question that I envision a commission answering for us. Like, okay, we've got our plan in place. Here's generally what we're aiming for. Now, how do we get there? And that's what a commission can tell us what to do. And that's what I believe an RFP is, or RFI is. So that would be something I would punt. Done. Does that give you direction, Max? From me, from one person?
No, and I think a lot of these themes are similar to one another. And, I hear very strongly demand response programs, other things like that. It's evident that we need to include more things in this IRP around the energy policy. That's loud and clear. So we hear that, and we're going to work in improving that for sure.
And last comment while I still have the floor for a second. And I'm envisioning RFP loads my plate up, and then our task force takes the plate and divides it up into its bits. That's a vision I'm looking at. We can talk more about it when we have it on the committee. But as we're thinking about what a task force actually does, I see it as, how high do we pile the plate, and then how do we divide the plate out? Not what the actual little carrots and sticks or whatever are on the plate. So that's my vision of a task force as we're thinking of them in relation to Brattle.
Okay. Oh, I thought you were first. Okay. Go ahead, Jen.
Honestly, I would see Brattle telling us what our plates are. And what I would see with those plates is, how does that help us get to the net zero? That's one thing that I would love to see, especially with the technologies. There's a lot of technologies out there. But in 5 years, when we redo this, those technologies could change. And so I would love to see, from the technology standpoint, what is currently available and how does that get us to meet these goals of CEJA? How does this plate, what is the rate to get us down to the non-emissions? So for me, that's what I would see Brattle doing is giving us that menu of different plates and letting us know, like, how much is, green, how much is, fossil fuel. I see a diverse portfolio. And what is that ratio? Is there one that is 70% of gas and then 30% of natural or of green energy? But then also, how does that look to us meeting those goals? So that, to me, that's what I want to see is a graph showing that. And then the percentage of the different, I want my menu telling me, the different categories. Show me the different plates and how that works.
Oh, if I may, this menu concept, a lot of you have mentioned that. What types of things do you want to see within that? We'll obviously give direction to Brattle to make it more like that, and let them come up with what that menu is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. A combination. A combination where it's heavy with the, fossil fuels, low on the green, or heavy on the green and low on the fossil fuels. Just diversity, because that's the one thing that we know that we talk about. We've got to have diversity with our energy just because of where we live. That's something that's going to be important, and all this is going to play into that.
One thing that might help with that is understanding what the minimum viable option is for each source. Like with the recip engine, my understanding is that's kind of one big unit and you can't really reduce that down too much. That's what I understand so far. So understanding like how small these units can be as individual units would help.
Scalability as well.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, just in terms of scalability, yeah, right.
And the flexibility for them to change to something else.
Yeah.
If needed.
One other thing I wanted to ask, slightly tangential to this. I know in October, the state passed another utility bill that is hoping to advance more battery storage in the state. I don't know if any of that's been fully fleshed out yet, but will they be looking at that?
Yeah, it's something we're keeping an eye on because the preliminary IRP does include modeling for batteries, and batteries could be an option for the city in certain scenarios. They are profitable and work well for the city. I'm keeping an eye on what programs may be coming out. I know the state did set, as part of the Clean and Reliable Grid Act, a goal of, I think, 3 gigawatts of battery storage. Yeah, they may be issuing grants and other options. So we're going to keep an eye on those. And should that be, should there be a grant coming out to say, hey, we'll help you build a battery or something, we'll bring that back to you and give you an is this something we want to try to apply for? Do we need to do more research? But that's where having a IRP and doing this process puts us in a better position if we know kind of what we're looking for, and then we can act on it.
Real quick, is that we staff or is that we staff Brattle?
Staff. In regards to looking
at the grants and the changing legislative landscape.
So staff tend to monitor grants that are available. We have a grant writing consultant, and we also tend to monitor the legislation. So those are things that staff do typically, but we will work with them as appropriately to get information, to get those expert consultings and whatnot. If a grant opportunity came out and there was a NOFO, a notice of funding opportunity, we're likely going to reach out to our grant writing consultants, help us understand what are the requirements, what is the state or whoever is making the grant look for, and then we're going to work as staff with our consultants, with you all, to put a grant package together and try to get funding for whatever we're seeking to do.
Person Loman.
I just wanted to say that I agree with a lot of the comments Bob and Kevin and Jen made, and Justin, about having different diversity of portfolios available, different menu of options, as much information as we can to help us analyze what's best. And along with that, I wanted to ask Alderperson Millay, earlier, did you put a motion on the table? Was there a motion? I think he did, right?
I did say that I motioned that we have a task force at this point. We're going to have it on the next committee. I'll withdraw that motion. Thanks for bringing that back up. There wasn't a second on it.
Okay, I was going to second it.
Okay.
Okay, so, all right, so no second on that then.
But it's on the agenda for next Tuesday.
Yeah, the
To talk
24th,
about.
it'll be on there.
Okay, well, just one last thing I'll say about that quick is how I envisioned the task force was to further analyze this information. So I don't really see any drawbacks to that, just having another group of people. Staff's already meeting with Brattle weekly. Why not bring in more people that are, an extra set of ears and eyes that are listening and providing more analysis on this in addition to us. So to me, I just think it's a win-win for everybody.
That's a discussion we'll have next Tuesday.
Yeah, just to remind everybody, what are we paying Brattle Group?
$385,000.
Okay. So, a lot of what I've heard discussed tonight, I just scratch my head and I'm thinking, these are the types of things they should be asking themselves based off of our direction we gave them as a city before, based on just the 4 points that we mentioned. I like feasibility getting thrown in there, highly like that actually. And so really, I think the task force, yes, should advise us on, reinstating who's boss in this equation type of thing, because they need to, it truly is ridiculous for the amount of money we paid. Reading through some of that, there's not a lot of substance. And then to have this come back, and I feel bad from a staff perspective. Hey, okay, so what do you guys want to do? And, I won't go through the exercise I went through in my head, but equating it to what I do for a living and equating that, it's like, huh? Like, no. You bring your product to us and consult us based off of what our town is chasing from all these different, avenues. So, again, I think we need to bring them back to the table, put it down, and then see what they come back with, and then we revisit from that point. But the task force, I think, is important, but I think I'm more eager to get back and bridle from an email perspective or a phone call or whatever and be like, listen, you need to watch that council meeting last night because, we had some robust discussion and whatnot. So
we'll make sure that BATV turns it around right away and so that it's available. And then you can send that to Brattle so they can watch this.
I was planning on drafting something tomorrow morning. Yeah, no, it is.
That's why we love you, Max.
Okay, we got like 13 seconds and we are done for the evening. I don't think we have any others. I don't think we have any more from staff. Nothing more from staff tonight, Max.
We'll reach out to Brattle. We'll have I've emailed our agenda people to make sure that we have this on a discussion for the next cow. Would we like to continue the 5-question discussion, among other things, at a special cow following a city of the council, or how do we want to proceed? Are we primarily, we'll email Brattle back and get, all this feedback and ask for revisions in an expedited timeline, but then also kind of some direction as well on how we want to address these, I guess, fundamental points as well. Do we wait till?
Missing.
Yeah, I think we discussed most of those 5 points tonight.
Yeah. Do they feel there's something missing based on their expertise that they need that feedback from us?
Understood.
Do you feel like you need something more from us?
No, I think I can send them this discussion and amongst other things. And
I think they'll know what we're getting at.
Yeah, it's just bad delivery. That's all this is. Yeah.
If there are no other.
So moved. No, sorry.
Motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.